those the feeds coming in right from Florida in the United States. U.S. President Donald Trump with officials of the U.S. government, right from the U.S. Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and we've had a whole lot of other individuals there. Marco Rubio, U.S. Secretary of State, right there with him, and we've also had other officials giving updates on what's been happening since the last 24 hours when the United States, through its special missions, through special ops, got into Caracas, the Venezuelan capital, overnight and arrested. Some people actually call it an abduction. They abducted the Venezuelan president alongside his wife, and Nicolas Maduro right now is, he was taken into a U.S. warship that was already waiting for the operations to be over. And of course, once they were taken away from Caracas, that actually led to the end of Maduro's government. And his vice president has been speaking with Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, according to what Trump told us not quite long ago. And she's been helping the U.S. authorities as the American reign of government actually begins in that country in South America. And of course, we have our special correspondent, James Blue, joining us right away. Thank you so much, James, for joining us. And what do you make of all that we've heard so far? I mean, U.S. President saying that Venezuela is in the kitty of the United States government and it will run the government there for some time. And then, of course, the people of Venezuela would actually enjoy the benefit of good governance. But of course, the U.S. would have to take a whole lot of oil to compensate for special operations. What do you make of that statement?
Well, it's very clear that President Trump was very impressed with the execution of the operation last night, and it's very clear that he feels as though his generals have delivered exactly what he wanted, and so it seems as though the entire operation went off without a hitch, and it seems as though they're very excited that they were able to get the Maduro and his wife. I'm sorry we're having technical difficulties. I'm not exactly sure what is wrong, but it was a precise and very clear operation. There you see the President Maduro in the handcuffed and on a boat and in sort of gray sweatpants. It's not clear exactly where he is going. President Trump said he could be coming to New York or to Miami. I was really surprised at the amount of detail that was available to us as a result of President Trump speaking just now.
James, take us through the statement by Marco Rubio. I mean, saying it clearly to world leaders that Trump is not a game player. And I'm saying exactly what he said. Trump is not a game player. If he says something or if he means something, he actually means it. And Maduro could have been somewhere relaxing, but he decided to play game. Don't play game with this president. What do you make of that?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very clear that President Trump is trying to figure out exactly how to shape this. The U.S. is saying that they are going to work with the opposition, but that they're going to run the country until they can turn it over. It was very interesting that they did not immediately embrace the opposition leader, Ms. Machado, who just won the Nobel Peace Prize. There's also Juan Guaido, who was elected about 4 years ago. And so this is a real sort of interesting moment where the U.S. is sort of doing things there that aren't necessarily expected. The fact that the U.S. is going to administer Venezuela, I think it's really quite surprising. The U.S. and specifically Trump has said that he did not want to get involved in entanglements overseas. And so this is a real surprise, and we'll just have to wait and see how how it transpires.
And if I could actually go back to what had been said about Congress, granting approval to this, Trump was very, very strong in his words, saying that there's no how Congress would have been told all of this because it would have leaked. And then people are actually asking if Congress did not approve of this, the UN did not approve of this, then where's the legitimacy that Trump is getting to actually get into a sovereign country and abduct its president and do all of this?
Yeah, well, you heard them say that this was a law enforcement operation that the U.S. military assisted. And I think they also talked about not getting congressional approval because they were worried that it might leak. So I think you're going to hear those two over and over because they're going to say the secrecy was justified because it was a sort of quote unquote Justice Department event, and that the congressional support and approval didn't need to come until after the operation was actually undertaken.
And there have been calls for a special UN Security Council meeting on this. What else have you been hearing? I mean, shouldn't there be one? Because, I mean, a whole lot of world leaders have been kicking against what happened, though Trump has got a few support from his friends, especially in Argentina, and of course, some of his friends that he's helped put in government across the Americas.
Yeah, Yeah, I think there's going to be this tension, and the U.S. is not going to acknowledge it. The U.S. wants to be the big player on the block. They want to sort of do the things that they want to do without any kind of effort from other countries. And so I think there may be actions at the UN, but because the U.S. is declaring itself kind of the leader and the group that's responsible most importantly for the Western Hemisphere, I don't think there's going to be a lot of pushback. I think there'll be a lot of complaints. There'll be a lot of, isn't this unilateralism? But at the end of the day, I don't think the US is going to um, do anything different.
And there was a warning shot to Havana. I mean, the Cuban government was actually mentioned here. And this is what Marco Rubio had to say, that Cuba is a disaster run by senile and incompetent leaders. If I lived in Havana, I would be concerned. How do you think the
Yeah,
likes of
this
Russia
is
and
a
all of that will
warning.
take that?
Yeah, this is a warning that the U.S. may have sights set on Cuba. I think the Cuban military is quite more advanced, I suspect, than the Venezuelan military. And so that is something that will sort of have to be sort of taken into account of. But yeah, it's just very clear that the US knows that there's opportunity in the region and the leaders have been warned.
When it comes to running the country, Trump says he's been talking with, I mean, some of his team members, and they will be getting people to designate right there. And of course, he said Machado is not, I mean, she's a very good woman, but when it comes to running the country and all of this, as the opposition leader, this is a different ballgame. So do we have hints on who will likely be running Venezuela on behalf of the US government, since the vice president, who is supposed to take over right now, has been described as someone who got in illegitimately alongside Nicolas Maduro, though she's not with Maduro.
Yeah, we don't know who from the local Venezuelan population is going to cooperate and be part of the administration of running the country. We think it is possible that Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth are going to be very much involved. It was really quite striking to hear that the President Trump does not think Mrs. Machado is in a position to run things. So we'll just have to wait and see. I was in Iraq and Afghanistan when the U.S. was responsible for running those countries. Venezuela is far different, and there's actual an economy in Venezuela. There was also an economy in Iraq, but it had been really worn down by the years of sanctions. And so perhaps because of the oil revenue, there's some hope that things can be done to kind of get the country moving again.
And what should the rest of the world be learning from the U.S. intervention in Venezuela? Because I mean, there have been lots of talks about sovereignty and the issues of Trump actually doing this because it's a third world country and all of that. So, what should the rest of the world be worried about right now?
I think the rest of the world should take America at its word. The new security strategy, which the president referenced, really speaks about the U.S. wanting to be the dominant force in the Western Hemisphere. And so I think that's going to be carried out and played out. So it's a really good roadmap to what it is the U.S. says they want to do. And so I think the real headline here is that the US believes that some nations can go and do what they want to do. Now, I'm going to be very cynical here. If I were Mr. Zelensky in Ukraine, I would be very worried because basically the US has done something very similar to what President Putin has been trying to do. And the US has done it by first going after the quote unquote leader of Venezuela. They've done it in the context of a U.S. indictment, and there have been additional indictments against Maduro's wife that were just filed within the last week. But I think this is makes it much, much, much more difficult for President Trump to call for President Putin to actually leave Ukraine because the similarities between what the US saying they're doing and what Russia is saying they're doing.
Before I let you go, James Blue, talk to us about why the U.S. would be doing this in trying to operate the Monroe Doctrine and, increase the sphere of influence within its region, but will disallow Russia to do same with Ukraine or a China to do same with Hong Kong and Taiwan.
Yeah, there's some sense that this is the pivot to the world powers sort of taking control. And, we will take care of our patch, you take care of your patch. So Russia then has the license to do what it wants in Europe, and China has the license to do what it wants in Asia, and then sort of Africa is sort of left out on its own to see whoever has the, will or the capacity to deal with it. No, I think it is very worrying, but it is very much in the way that President Trump sort of sees himself as a great man, as a statesman who is on par with Xi of China and Putin of Russia. And I think he does not have the sort of democratic spirit that one might hope for that would allow him to look beyond the strong man and allow him to really see the danger in this organization.
A very quick one before you go. I was expecting our colleagues there as journalists to actually ask Trump if this wasn't a violation of the UN Charter. But I mean, I didn't see that question coming until the press briefing ended. So, I mean, if you were there, wouldn't you have asked such a question as such a presser if the U.S. intervention in Venezuela was not, breaking the UN Convention on the sovereignty of countries? And then, of course, others also asking on why the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has not faced a similar situation despite an ICC warrant on him and all of that.
Yeah, look, I think there are a lot of inconsistencies, and there are certainly questions that I would love to have asked within the news conference. I was really struck by the fact that he has had conversations with President Maduro. We don't know the exact way those conversations have gone, but clearly they've been in some dialogue, and clearly they were given a chance to move and to leave Venezuela before this action was taken. And I would have wanted to explore much more on that because I think that issue of the time allowed to leave between that and the time the strikes happened, like, was there enough time for them to get to safety, for them to shelter? But I think that's what I would have explored more if I were actually in the press conference.
All right, thank you so much. All right, special correspondent James Blue joining us to take a look at the presser that just ended, where U.S. President Donald Trump and his cabinet officials disclosed to U.S. citizens and, of course, to us globally on the reason for the arrest of Nicolas Maduro and his wife, and, of course, the latest steps that will be taken by the U.S. government, and, of course, how the Venezuelan government would also have to pay for the special operations intervention in that country. We must thank you so much for all you've helped us to understand.